Good evening, everyone. We'll give it just a moment or two as everyone makes their way into the presentation. And welcome to the Georgia Virtual College Fair. Thank you for joining us this evening. A few housekeeping announcements before we get started. You can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to our presenters at any time. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. Also, as a reminder, this is just one of many different sessions that are happening as part of the Georgia Virtual College Fair, so be sure to sign up for additional sessions. And this presentation is being recorded and will be available in about a week at the same site where you originally registered. Now I'd like to turn it over to our presenters.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Owen, and thanks to StriveScan and also to Probe for putting on this event. My name is Rick Clark. I'm the Director of Admission at Georgia Tech in Midtown Atlanta. And tonight, really pleased to have a couple of my colleagues from various institutions around the state joining me to have just a candid conversation about testing in the age of COVID. We're gonna talk a little bit about this concept of test optional. We'll talk about admission processes and how decisions may be made similarly or differently than years in the past. And try to just give a little bit of insight into what's happening on our campuses and how hopefully that is helpful to you all, particularly as you consider testing this year. So with that said, I want to start just by having each of our panelists introduce themselves, the institution they work for, maybe one or two things that are kind of interest to folks these days. So Amy, if you don't mind kicking us off, and then we'll go to Romina and then Travis, and then we'll start with our first question.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Amy Confas. I'm the Director of Admission at Agnes Scott. I'm a proud Scottie as well. I graduated in 2008, and I've worked in the admission office since that time. Agnes Scott, if you don't know about Agnes Scott, we are a small liberal arts private 4-year women's college, and we are located in pretty much downtown Decatur. So hopefully a lot of you are familiar. We're very close to Georgia Tech, Emory, and Georgia State, but we love our little slice of Decatur. And a special thing that we're known for is our amazing summit program. It's an incredible experience that every student participates in. So that's my little summit teaser. We'll come back to that later, or you can look up more info later.
That's great. Thanks, Amy. And also, Amy recently married, so congratulations on your wedding. Romina, let's go to you next.
Thank you, Rick. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Romina Torres. I'm the Director of Admissions at Georgia State. I have been with the institution now for 6 years. Few interesting things about Georgia State. We're the largest university in the state of Georgia. We have over 52,000 students enrolled right now. We are located in downtown Atlanta, but we also have campuses around the metro area for Perimeter College. Another interesting fact is that we are the third most innovative university in the nation, and happy to be here. Thank you.
Great, thanks. And Travis, let's wrap it up with you, my friend.
Hi, my name is Travis Culver. I am one of the associate deans at Emory, and I am starting my 4th year at Emory and being in Atlanta. So I can't say I'm new anymore, but still feel like I'm getting my sea legs sometimes in the city. A couple of cool things that I like to point out about Emory. So we are right in Atlanta, but we are a medium-sized research institution with a liberal arts core. And so we really push that. We want students to experiment, explore, and kind of get messy with things, but you have the resources of a research university.
Very good. Well, and lastly, with Georgia Tech, located in Midtown Atlanta, I think one of the things that is about to kind of get a lot of press, I think, soon, that is involving Georgia Tech, but really just of interest in general, I think, for probably all Georgians, is a project I've heard about a lot in recent years called the CAP. And this is the idea of basically, in a lot of ways, bringing commercial and a park over the highway in downtown or midtown Atlanta between North Avenue and 10th Street, and potentially even further than that. And I was in on a meeting earlier today where they're just talking about this and the timeline and everything that's going to be necessary to make that politically, funding wise, et cetera. But really kind of a fascinating project to think about if you've heard about projects like that in, Boston with the Big Dig or Dallas or some of these other places. It's kind of cool to think Atlanta might actually get something that would really change our city and bring it back to what it was before the highway. So, well, listen, we're going to get right into it. Amy, I want to start with you. You're, I think, in some ways the expert in the room here. Agnes Scott's been test optional for a while. Can you just tell us in general, because so many students have not been able to test, the University System of Georgia, went test optional. Many schools around the country are. I think the number now is somewhere around 1,500. But that's a term that not all students or families might be familiar with. So what is that, and how does that work in an admission process?
Sure. So at the very, very basic level, test optional admission or test optional policies mean that a college is giving you as the applicant the decision to submit SAT or ACT scores as a part of your application for admission. Now, I think it's really important to know that test optional policies look really different from institution to institution. So you have to do a lot of research to figure out, okay, like where can I apply test optional and what do I need to apply test optional at each institution? I think it's also important to know that some institutions may require test scores for scholarships. So they may be okay with you not submitting test scores for admission, but they may need it for scholarship consideration. So again, it's just really important to ask each college. Agnes Scott has been test optional since 2009, 2010. So I'm actually really excited. While these are really difficult circumstances, I am excited for so many colleges out there to try test optional admission. And I'm hopeful that it won't be a temporary solution. I think many of the colleges that are trying it out will be able to sort of implement test optional policies in the future. So I'm happy to talk more about our specific policy, or we can do that later on too.
Yeah, actually, if you don't mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about Agnes Scott and then places in particular where you feel like, what you guys are doing is or is not necessarily representative of even a bigger part of the landscape.
Sure. So Agnes Scott's test optional policy, if you're a high school senior applying for admission, you have 3 options. You can submit your test scores as a part of your application. If you prefer not to do that, you can either sit for an evaluative interview. That's an interview that you do with your admission counselor at Agnes Scott. And that's really our chance to get to know you, to understand more about your academic journey through high school, and more about what you're looking for from your college choice. So the evaluative interview is your second option, and your third option is submitting a graded writing sample, which is a piece of writing from your junior or senior year that has your teacher's comments on it and grade on it, so that we can sort of get a better sense of what your class was like. So you have to choose one of those 3 options, and you do that when you apply to Agnes Scott. We ask you to let us know which test optional choice you're choosing on the common application. So you'll have the Agnes Scott supplement, and you're going to choose one of those 3 options. So that's how it works at Agnes Scott. I will say for our homeschool students, for our international students, and for transfer students, the options do look a little bit different. So again, I think it is really important to follow up with each school and understand what the options are for you. And one more thing I'll mention is that scholarships at Agnes Scott, you can be test optional for all of our scholarships. So we do not require test scores at any point in the process.
Yeah, you hit on a couple of key things there. I think one of the biggest, of course, is every school you're applying to, you should be looking closely into their policies, because even though they may require or not require tests for a certain part of their applicant pool, there may be either options, as you just kind of laid out, or times where tests, are going to be part of the process. So that's super helpful. Romina, why don't we go to you a little bit there on that, actually. Georgia State obviously being one of 26 USG institutions. And so I think in this regard, you kind of can speak for the whole system, at least to an extent. Can you tell us what you think, Georgia State's doing, but also how you feel like that might be representative of the other publics around the state as it relates to test optional?
Sure. Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Amy, for just a great explanation about this optional admissions for Georgia State University. And I think it applies to many of the institutions in the system of Georgia. The student will not be penalized if they don't submit test scores. And I think that's a very important factor to understand because I know many of the questions that we have been getting lately, will I be penalized? What are my options? And I'll repeat that students will not be penalized if they decide not to take or submit their test scores. For Georgia State specifically, we're gonna be looking mainly at the high school GPA. So we're gonna be recalculating the high school GPA based on the required high school curriculum that is set by the University System of Georgia. And we're very excited because we're gonna also be looking at anything from the what classes the student have been taking. Have been taking like honors, AP, or IB classes, so the setting. But also if they submit an essay, they submit a recommendation letter. So we're gonna be able to grasp a better picture of the student, where before the requirements were very straightforward as far, at least for Georgia State, as far as GPA and test scores. And I think that's the case for many of the schools, but I'll repeat what Amy said. It is super important for each of you to do the research on each school and what they may require, because they may have, for example, different GPA requirements on a test optional admissions. They may have additional requirements once you have been accepted, like a placement exam. Not necessarily, again, for Georgia State, but just to give you different examples of what other universities might be looking at here in Georgia, public universities specifically.
Very good. Yeah, that's great. And Travis, Romina kind of touched on this a little bit. I'd love to hear kind of Emory and where you all are, but also she was sort of alluding to this concept of holistic admission review and multiple factors. Can you kind of talk broadly about that also, and how tests or no tests kind of are taken into consideration in that holistic concept?
Yeah. So one of the exciting things about this is that at a place like Emory, many of us on this call, we always practice a holistic review, meaning that we factored in not only your test score, but your high school curriculum, the rigor that you've taken, your extracurricular activities, leadership, if you had a job outside of campus, if you've done internships, all of those things really do matter to us. And so moving to test optional hasn't necessarily shifted a lot, but it does place the emphasis on what you've done inside the classroom, 100% there for us to take a look at. At Emory, we are going to be test optional this year. And again, like others have said, we're not sure what this might mean for future years for students, but it has a potential to stick depending on how this looks. Students who want to be considered for merit scholarships are also test optional at Emory. So I always say it doesn't hurt you or help you to submit a test score, but you should, for many students, they will feel that that is reflective of their ability, and that's perfectly okay. They can submit it. And there will be some students who feel that it is not as reflective and may opt not to. So
that's good. Yeah, and that's very similar at Georgia Tech, I would say. And, you know, that idea that for years we have put a lot of emphasis, you know, on the rigor of your curriculum in high school. And that's really where we've spent most of our time. And really now I'm kind of talking for colleges kind of in general. I mean, I think most families would be surprised at how fast we get past test scores, but yet how much time we're spending talking about things like you just alluded to with, you know, what choices did you have at the high school you attended and what did you choose to take, and the kind of trends and patterns, and you know how a lot of us look at what's predictive, right, on our college campuses, and for most schools around the country, that's what it's going to be, right? 4 years of high school way more predictive than 4 years, you know, on a Saturday taking that test. So that's good. Romina, I have a very simple question for you, which even after hearing, you know, all of us talk, so does optional really mean optional? And I think we've been the part of the problem for this in the past, because I know I could rewind myself saying things about like, if you see a school that has optional interviews, you should do it. And talking about kids, like, scratch out recommended and just do it. But given COVID and given a global pandemic and given that this is not normal life for anyone right now, does optional really mean optional?
It really does. Optional means optional. Your safety is first. One, don't drive hundreds of miles to take a test. That's the first recommendation, to put yourself in danger. So optional means optional.
And, one thing I want to throw out there is maybe we can get this as a follow-up or potentially put it into a Q&A. I'm not sure if that'll work or not, but our national organizations put out a statement that's hundreds of people around the country, many of whom are on this call and others beyond us too, have signed on saying that, right? I mean, the optional really does mean optional, and we get that it's just a different time right now, for sure. If we figure out a way to put that in there, perhaps we can do that. Travis, I want to come to you with this question. So there are some schools that are actually test blind, and that's a term now that is getting thrown out there a lot in the press. If a student hears that or a family hears that, what is that, and how is that different than what we've just been talking about?
Yeah, so test blind means that the school, even if you send your test scores in for admission, they will not factor them in as part of the decision. So at a place like Emory, we say that, if you feel confident with your scores, please do send them to us. We'd like to take a look at them and factor them in. At a school that is test blind, they would say, we don't want to see your scores. If you send them to us, we're not going to consider them as part of the information that we consider for admission.
Great. Hey, there was a question in the Q&A that I wanted to throw out there to anyone that might be willing to take it. From Madison. It says, as a parent, I'm concerned that the schools my daughter attends doesn't offer AP or IB. So is that going to negatively affect her? She's taken all the advanced level courses, and also is doing dual enrollment courses. So Amy, would you be willing to start that and then see if anybody else would like to add on?
Yeah, so it sounds like your student is doing what she needs to be doing in high school, right? And every college or every high school, the opportunities do look different. So it's great to see that she's taking the most challenging courses that her school offers and also stepping outside to take some dual enrollment classes. So I think she's doing a great job of setting herself up. Certainly for Agnes Scott, no big plug here, but send her my application. I'd be excited to read it.
Awesome. That's good. There was another question in there that I know is on a lot of people's mind around Hope and Zell. And, the current rule or law, I should say, as it stands within the legislature, is that a student to receive Zell needs to score at a 1200 or a 26, so SAT or ACT on a single sitting in order to receive that. So what we have been talking with our government relations folks about and Georgia Student Finance Commission, who administers the Zell Miller Scholarship, is that this will be a conversation during this year's session. So when the legislative session comes back in, this is absolutely going to be on the table. And it is in question as to how that vote will go, the timing of that vote, and the fact that ultimately the governor would then, need to approve that. So my best recommendation, and I think this is what I'm hearing from my colleagues at other publics in the state, is that if you are admitted and if you then are choosing to attend a USG, so we have months and months to go before this, we could be looking at a very different, life and level of testing administration capacity at that point. The likelihood is, if you're a senior, you would need to have that test. The question, I think, is, what is the best thing for you and your family from a safety standpoint and from a logistics standpoint, knowing there's many layers between now and then, and many months, and lots can change. So it is a valid point for the person that put it in Q&A. You're asking the question many people are also asking. We don't know how that's going to play out legislatively, but there is certainly going to be time. Amy, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I just want to mention that I think it's a great time to contact your legislators, because I actually did this because I read about Representative David Wilkerson. He doesn't represent my area, but he did introduce some legislation to try to temporarily remove that. So I found his email and I sent him an email and said, that's awesome. And he actually got back in touch with me, which made me feel really good. So I would say this is a great time to reach out to your legislators and let them know that this is something that is on your mind and you're worried about. And even if you're looking at, private institutions like Emory or Agnes Scott, there are many of, private institutions in the state of Georgia and also outside. We still receive Hope and Zell Miller for you. So that is an important piece of the puzzle, even if you're looking outside of the USG schools.
Yeah, that's a great point. Hey, Amy, I want to stay with you on this. We've hit on it a little bit already, but given that a lot of students will not have tests to send, even if they maybe had wanted to, and we've talked about holistic and a couple of the things, but what have we missed on other things that holistic admission includes and other things that admission decisions are often based on? And do you think, this is a little bit of crystal ball, but either at Agnes Scott in conversations you've had or what you're hearing from colleagues around the country, are there other things you think people will be putting more emphasis on maybe than they have in the past as a result?
Yeah, so as far as talking about holistic review, what that means for Agnes Scott is really that everything that you submit, and that is, for us, we're a common application school. So you have a common application essay there. You have the Agnes Scott supplement that you would complete. Certainly your GPA, your transcript, and what classes you've chosen to take at your high school, your recommendation letters, and your activities. So everything that you really submit as part of your application goes into our review process. And Rick, I think you said the test scores, it's one piece that we look over. It tells us something, but it does not tell us the vast majority about you and the fit for, the institution that we serve. So at Agnes Scott, why we went test optional is that a student's GPA and what they were doing in high school, those decisions they were making about which classes to take, that was a much better predictor of their success in our first year coursework than test scores. So that's why we chose to go test optional about 10 years ago. Did I help with that? I think many, many schools across the country are going to be relying heavily on your transcript and the courses that you're taking, and continuing to look, as they always do, at other factors in there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, go ahead, Travis.
I was just going to add, some schools will factor in demonstrated interest as something that they will consider. I know Emory does not factor in demonstrated interest, but that is something that I think, whether a school counts it or not, I always say, as someone who has a territory that I work with, I think demonstrated interest does matter, because I get to know the students who contact me, who I may have a virtual visit with this year, who I've seen at a college fair or shoot me an email. And along the way, I can, give them nuggets about Emory to say, hey, Emory is a great fit for all of these reasons, or maybe you should be looking at Agnes Scott because they're going to be a better fit, or Georgia Tech, or any school, it doesn't have to be, but, so I do think demonstrated interest matters whether a school tracks it or not, but that can be a part of the holistic review as well.
Yeah, Travis, you may have said this, but I just want to stick with you for a second on a question I saw in the Q&A around scholarships. And the question was, for Emory, and then we can all just sort of say it for our own institutions, but Amy alluded to this earlier, that maybe it's not for admission, but it could be for scholarships at some places. What's the story at Emory this year?
Yeah, we are test optional for scholarship as well, so it is not required. Okay,
great. Amy, you already answered that question, that it's same optional, but you have your several platter of choices there, other options there. Romina, what about Georgia State? And also the Honors College at Georgia State.
Sure, same for Georgia State. We're test optional for both the scholarships and honors. The only thing honors will say, if the student feels that test scores are going to tell something about the student academically to go ahead and send them. Rather than that, it's just optional. If the student decides not to send SATs or SAT scores, they will not be penalized. And the same for scholarships.
Very good. And, you know, for a lot of people on the call, just to give you a sense of this, I mean, I don't know what the current numbers are, but there was a time in July, for instance, that the ACT was reporting numbers like by July of 2019, about 1.2 million students had been able to take the ACT. And by July of 2020, again, just for January through July of 2020, that number was under 100,000. So this is one of the reasons why a lot of schools kind of made that pivot, and including the NCAA. So, you know, if you're a student athlete and you're thinking about going to play college sports, then this also is going to hold true. I think that institutions and organizations have really recognized it's not about a student's desire to take the test. It's simply about the access to that, you know, to that test. All right, I want to go to you, Romina, here. So if a student has not yet tested and is not seeing a lot of testing centers open, which we know that's been pretty well documented, what is your advice? We've hit on this a little bit already, but can you just sort of walk us through what you would say to a student who might be experiencing that specifically?
Yeah. For students applying to Georgia State, I will tell them no need to test. Again, is optional. I will encourage them to do the research at the different universities that they're going to be applying to and the requirements, not only in admissions, but will be also spoke about scholarships, and see if their requirements are different, but specifically to Georgia State, no need to test.
Gotcha. And to put a really fine point on this, Travis, this is a question that I'm sure all of us have gotten, maybe even today, but certainly every year, and this year in particular. All right, you've got two students, right? And they are the same, you know, and one of them has a test and the other does not have the test. Is the kid with the test score going to get in? Isn't the kid with the test score going to get in?
No, not necessarily. You know, I think so. We are. It's funny, and everybody's laughing or smiling at this question because applications. We want you to understand that they're never taken in a vacuum, and there's never one thing that gets a student in or keeps a student out of an institution typically. And so in this case, you know, if you're saying, well, what about the student who looks just like me, has the same numbers as me? I'm going to push back and say that numbers don't tell the story. And that's what we've been trying to push this whole time. We really are test optional, and it really is not going to come down to that one thing. So have you challenged yourself inside and outside your classroom? Have you been successful with that challenge? And have you told us your story through your application?
Mm-hmm. That's good. That's good. Amy, I'm just kind of opening it up to you for a second here. I want to see, what are some of the other questions that, you know, you feel like you're getting more this year, some of the things that are on people's minds. There's just a lot of uncertainty out there, you know, as it relates to COVID. And then while we're on that note, can you talk a little bit about what Agnes Scott and a lot of other colleges are doing right now to, you know, meet with students, to put content out there, because a lot of students aren't able to necessarily visit campuses?
Sure. So I think to start, something that's on my mind, and I think it's been on a lot of people's minds, is that how we left last semester. We all moved very, very quickly into remote learning. And so I know for Agnes Scott, like, you know, we gave students the option of pass failing some of their courses rather than having letter grades. And I know that was happening at the high school level too. So on my mind, and I think on parents' minds and students' minds, is how will last semester look on my application? What about now? Many of us continue to be in remote learning environments. And my piece of advice is that we're going to do our best to really try to understand what was happening at your high school. And you have the chance through your application to really talk to us about that. A plug for ways that we're available. Agnes Scott, like our admission counselors have conversations, you can sign up for a one-on-one conversation all the time. It doesn't have to be the evaluative interview that I mentioned for applications. You're welcome to sort of sign up for an informational interview. And that's really a chance for us to talk more about like how you plan to apply, what questions you have about Agnes Scott. If you have concerns, we would be happy to spend that time with you. But we're just learning a lot about virtual programs. We had an awesome open house this weekend, but we're doing faculty chats, we're doing student chats, we're doing all of the chats to try to meet students where they are and at opportunities that work for them.
Perfect. Thank you. Travis, let's go to you. Same question. What are some of the other things you're hearing this year? What are some things you would want people to hear from you in terms of just putting things in perspective? And then, if somebody's interested in Emory or Oxford, how can they learn more if they aren't able to visit?
Thank you, Rick. I think a lot of folks have questions surrounding the kind of college experience and what that is going to look like for them. And so again, I think, Rick, you mentioned the crystal ball earlier. I wish we all had one. And so we don't know, and we are taking it, kind of day by day, month by month. And there's a little bit of uncertainty in that, but there's hopefully some excitement for you all because you are a part of the narrative, your wants and desires, you're building this with us. And so it really does have your flavor, your take, your flair on it. And so I do encourage students and families to be patient and have a little grace with yourself and with the universities that you're looking for as these things continue to unfold. The second part of your question in terms of visits, we same as with Agnes Scott, lots of virtual opportunities to connect with current students, faculty members, we've tried to slice it every way possible so that you can experience and hear from people what it's like to be a student at Emory and Oxford, but we currently don't offer on-campus programs or visits.
Very good. Thank you. Romina, same two questions.
Yep. Thank you. And to piggyback on Travis, we're getting a lot of that question as well. What is going to be the experience coming into college under COVID? And I can assure you, Georgia State and all the colleges are working really hard to bring that student experience under the current circumstances, how to keep the students engaged, how to get them involved, even if it's a remote virtual environment. So definitely lots of opportunities are still available for the students. May look a little bit different, but there are still a lot of opportunities available. As far as campus visit, Georgia State still, we're not offering on-campus visit. Everything is virtual. And like Amy and Travis say, we have everything from virtual appointments to virtual open houses. We have Panther-to-Panther chats every week where you can meet with current Georgia State students. We're gonna have a virtual open house starting on October 15, and it's going to go through the weekend. So I think the silver lining on all this is it has allowed the universities to be more innovative on how to develop programs to still reach out and meet the students where they are. Meet with school counselors also through virtual appointments. So nothing has really stopped from that side. We're still able to provide the services.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I would agree. In fact, we have some whiteboards in our hallway at the office now that's like, what are some of the silver linings of COVID? What are some of the lessons learned? What are the things you never want to go back to doing the way we used to? Stuff like that. And I think you're right. I think one of the big silver linings is, we're all more accessible and we're putting better information out online. One broad resource, since we've all said you should research the schools that you're looking to apply to, is YouVisit, youvisit.com, has a ton of schools around the country, many in our state and also around the country. If you just want to kind of get on, and it's just a good opportunity to keep an open mind and explore broadly, which is really what everyone should be doing, in the college admission experience. Romina, I wanted to ask you a question back to testing a little bit in Georgia State. tell us about how it works with Georgia State and perimeter, and how that works or might work this year with GPA and tests or no tests.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have at Georgia State, and even when we were requiring test scores, let's say 3 different groups where the students fall based on their academics. Right now, under a test optional, it will be mainly based on the GPA. So you'll have students that based on their GPA ranges, they'll be offered admissions to downtown Atlanta. There'll be students that will be offered admissions into one of our success programs like Success Academy, Panthers Excellence Program, or Perimeter Academy at Perimeter College. And then you have students that are deferred to perimeter. So that's more in the lower range in their GPA. I think we're always looking what is the best program that is going to be, that's going to help the students be successful. So that's when we look at the GPA, we look at the rigor of the classes that have been taken. And now we're getting more information under test optional. We'll be able to better play. Oh, did you lose me? Am I back? Yes. Students under a 2.5 high school GPA will likely be deferred to perimeter. So specifically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just one more thing that we're looking at is we started doing this back in March, is calculating an English and a math GPA on the applicants, just to have a better picture of how well or how successful they may do on college level classes under a test optional admissions.
That's good. The USG has something on their website called a freshman index, and some people may be familiar with that, where historically a student would be able to look at various types of schools around our state and get a sense of what they would need to be admitted. Some of that is GPA and traditionally has been ACT, SAT. With what you're just describing, is that the kind of thing that's kind of publicly facing for Georgia State, where you're giving that type of formula?
We're not going to be looking at a freshman index under test optional because so many students are not going to have test scores available. So it's going to be based on the GPA. And we are calculating specifically the GPA for all the math classes taken in high school, or all the English GPA, all the English classes taken in high school that are part of the required high school curriculum.
Got it. Okay, that's good. Hey, Travis, I want to ask you a very different but somewhat overlapping concept, because help us understand Emory and Oxford and how that works in application, maybe how that works in admission. Does this have anything to do with testing or not?
So it is not impacting testing in any way. So it is the same policy. And for those who are not familiar, Emory has 2 front doors, we like to say, and that is Emory College, which is on the Atlanta campus, and Oxford College, which is located 38 miles east of Atlanta in Oxford, Georgia, and houses first and second year students, just under 1,000. Those students transition onto the Atlanta campus in their junior years, and they will continue in Emory College, the nursing school, or the business school. It is pretty unique and somewhat hard to wrap your head around at first. They're academically equivalent, locationally very distinct. And so if you are someone who enjoys the small campus, who wants to take on leadership within the first 2 years of your college experience, at Oxford, essentially our sophomores are seniors. So they are captains of the sports teams, they are RAs, they are, student body president at Oxford. So lots of opportunities to get your feet under you in that way. And I always say we have an organic farm, which is pretty cool, exciting for research opportunities, as well as students can go and pick tomatoes or peppers, which I've done several times. They're really good. So. And I should say, sorry, Rick, I'll wrap up this. The 2 entry points, the 3 exit points, so whether you start at Emory College or Oxford College, are the nursing school, the business school, or Emory College of Arts and Sciences.
That's great. Thank you very much. Yeah, Amy, go ahead.
Rick, there's one or two questions in the Q&A that I was hoping we might talk about. One has to do with ranking. So high school rank. What rank am I in high school? And are colleges paying close attention to rankings through, our holistic review process? I'll answer quickly and say that it is something that is a part of the review, but it's not something that for us makes a significant difference in our admission process or in scholarship process. So it's definitely something that we note and we see where you stand in your class, but your GPA, the strength of your coursework, everything in there matters a lot more.
Yeah, for Georgia Tech, I can just say, and I think I hear a lot of colleagues say this around the country, I mean, rank varies so much that we have to look at the nuance and the context of that. And a really good local and big example, of course, is Gwinnett. At least certain Gwinnett schools where, they just sort of stack students based on GPA without looking at grade trends, without looking really much at rigor. I know there's some exceptions, but largely that's true. And so it's common that a student might be ranked 82nd and be admitted, and another student ranked 9th and not be admitted because of the other things we've said we value, right? Course choice, rigor of curriculum, grade trends, et cetera. Travis, you want to add anything to that?
I think you guys, did a wonderful job. So.
Okay, great. Did you see anything else in there, Amy, or Travis?
There was one thing that I wanted to bring up, which a student asked about. And I think it's, I have had classes that maybe haven't gone that well, or my GPA I don't feel like is a really, really strong reflection. And that's a really hard question to answer. I can really only answer that from Agnes Scott's perspective, which is that it's important to apply and put your best foot forward. I think it's important to know the average, GPA at a certain institution so that you have an idea of what they're looking for in their students. One class, mistakes look really different, but I am super proud to work at an institution where I have that flexibility. If I see that, a student had a bad semester, but everything else looks really strong and they have a really solid reason for what was going on. I like being able to make some of those, to make that decision and admit a student, but every institution is really different.
Yeah, one thing I would add though that you said was if they see a reason, and this is where I think it's incumbent on the student to use the whole application to tell their story. Sometimes the transcript does not tell the whole story, but in all of our applications, on the Common App and oftentimes on various institutional applications, there's a section called additional information or special circumstances or something like that. That's on you, right, to talk about it. So things happen. We know this in life, even outside of COVID. Mom and dad got divorced, you got in a car accident, bad illness or something like that. There are reasons sometimes that you can explain things. And so that's super important to use the whole application to tell your story and be proactive. Romina, were you about to say something on that?
No, I totally agree. This is an opportunity for the, I'm excited about the test optional because again, we're not looking straightforward at GPA and test scores. We're gonna be able to look at a broader picture of the student. So it is their time to tell the story. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, my understanding is that we are going to effectively be cut off at 6:45, which time is narrowing in on that now. So I think I want to just thank you all for your time tonight, for being willing to share your insight and your perspective. We don't speak for all colleges around the country always, but I think a couple things I heard tonight that are so key are research closely the schools that you are interested in. Travis, you specifically mentioned just how available people are, and everybody kind of enumerated how they're being, giving access to students. So reach out and get that information. And to the students and families tonight who have been with us, thanks so much. And we will end our call, but we appreciate it. Owen, anything in closing?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, thank you to all of our presenters for giving time this evening, as well as to all of you for joining us. When this webinar ends, there will be a link to a quick 4-question survey, and we would appreciate any feedback that you can provide. Also, this is just one of many sessions being hosted as part of this virtual college fair, so please be sure to sign up for additional ones. In about a week's time, you'll be able to find the recording of this session, as well as all others on the same site where you originally made your registration. Thanks again, and have a great evening.